When you're cornered, when you're facing this overwhelming force, every single instinct in your body just screams to fight back, right? To go down swinging, to defend your honor. But what if that's the exact wrong move? What if the most powerful, the most strategic choice you could make is to do the one thing that looks like the absolute weakest? Today, we're diving deep into Law 22, a really counterintuitive principle for turning weakness into, well, absolute power.
So the heart of this law is a direct challenge to how we're wired. It's basically saying that fighting for honor when you're completely outmatched isn't bravery, it's just a terrible mistake. The key insight here is to see surrender not as an end, but as a powerful strategic tool. It's about buying yourself time to regroup so you can actually win later.
To really get why this law is so vital, we first need to understand the catastrophic cost of ignoring it. Our first story is a serious cautionary tale from ancient Greece. It's a story of what happens when high-minded principles run smack into brutal, cold reality. This is the tragedy of the millions. Okay, so picture this. The year is 416 BC. The mighty city-state of Athens, a naval superpower, shows up at the small, neutral island of Melos. The Athenians, they don't want a long, messy fight. They make a simple and frankly a chilling offer. The choice was stark. You can submit and live as one of our allies, or you can resist and be utterly destroyed. Now, what's really fascinating here is the argument the Athenians used. They didn't talk about morality or justice. Nope. They just laid out the cold, hard physics of power. This quote, it's one of the most ruthless expressions of political realism in all of history. It makes it crystal clear that for them, ideas like fair play were just luxuries for equals. For the weak, there was only one option: acceptance.
So how did the millions respond to this ice-cold calculation? Well, they chose honor. They put their faith in ideals, in the hope that the gods would favor their just cause, and that their allies, the Spartans, would show up and save the day. They made a stand on principle and absolutely refused to surrender.
And the outcome? It was as predictable as it was tragic. The gods were silent. The Spartans never came. Athens invaded, they executed all the men, sold the women and children into slavery, and then just repopulated the island with their own colonists. By fighting for honor, the Melians lost literally everything, proving the law's most brutal lesson. So that's the price of defiance from a position of weakness. A pretty grim lesson, right? But what's the alternative? Our next case study shows a radically different approach to facing an overwhelming authority. This is the story of the playwright Bertolt Brecht. All right, flash forward to 1947. The House Un-American Activities Committee starts its witch hunt in Hollywood. A group known as the Hollywood 19 chose to go in guns blazing. They challenged the committee's authority, read statements, and stood tall on principle. And for their efforts, they were blacklisted, their careers totally ruined. Brecht, however, he looked at their plan and thought, no, that's not going to work. He chose a path of cunning compliance. So when it was his turn to testify, the committee was expecting another firebrand. Instead, in walks this polite, cooperative man, even wearing a suit and smoking a cigar, just like the committee's chairman. He appeared to yield completely, totally disarming their aggression with his deference. He was brilliant. He used their own process against them. By insisting on an interpreter, even though he spoke fluent English, he created this fog of ambiguity. When they'd read a really revolutionary line from one of his plays, he'd just calmly reply with something like this, basically claiming the translation was just all wrong. He ran circles around them while looking like he was obeying every rule. So there you have it, the millions, destroyed by their resistance, and Brecht's, who walked free through his apparent compliance. The contrast between these two stories perfectly illuminates the core of Law 22, the surrender tactic. So let's be really clear here. Surrendering isn't defeat. Not at all. It's a strategy to gain the one thing you need most when you're weak, and that's time. Time to regroup, time to observe your enemy's weaknesses, and time to wait for their power to eventually fade. In doing so, you deny them the satisfaction of a clear, clean victory. Leonardo da Vinci told this great little fable that just captures this idea perfectly. The rigid, spiky chestnut believes its armor is going to protect it, but all that does is invite people to smash it with rods and stones. The soft fig, on the other hand, is plucked carefully by hand. The lesson is simple. A hard, brittle defense just invites violence. Yielding forces your opponent to be a lot more careful. Okay, so we get the theory, But how do you actually master this tactic, right? How do you turn that outward weakness into a hidden strength? Well, it all comes down to a few core principles.
First, and this is the most critical part, you have to master your own emotions. Your gut instinct is to react, to fight back. You have to suppress that. Second, you bend on the outside while staying firm on the inside. It's a performance. And third, and this is the most important part, you have to use the time that you've bought. This isn't passive waiting. This is a period of active intelligence gathering and strategic planning.
For a perfect historical example of this, look at King Gujian of ancient China. After crushing defeats, he didn't run. He surrendered. And for 3 years, he worked in his enemy's stables, performing the most humiliating tasks you can imagine. But that entire time, he was observing, learning, and waiting. Once he was released, he waited for his moment, invaded, and achieved a devastating revenge. It was a masterclass in using surrendered time.
And this tactic works on a grand scale, too. When 19th century Japan was faced with the overwhelming military and industrial power of the West, they chose not to fight a war they knew they couldn't win. Instead, they yielded. They opened their doors, they copied Western technology and methods, and they learned from their potential conquerors, all while fiercely protecting their own culture. They surrendered in the short term to gain superiority in the long term.
Ultimately, this law is all about adopting a long-term perspective. It's about understanding that power is never static. Empires rise and fall. The strong become weak. The whole goal of the surrender tactic isn't just to survive the present moment, but to position yourself to thrive in the future.
You know, there's a humorous but incredibly profound Ethiopian proverb that maybe summarizes the spirit of this law better than anything. It captures the entire dynamic, the outward show of respect and submission which hides this inner feeling of contempt and defiance. You obey on the outside, but on the inside, you are not broken. So what about the alternative, right? The noble act of martyrdom. Well, while it can be inspiring, it's a deeply unpredictable and often selfish tactic. Think about it. For every one martyr whose death sparks a revolution, there are thousands whose sacrifices are just completely forgotten by history. The surrender tactic is about something much more practical, staying alive to see the pendulum swing back in your favor. Which leaves us with a final question to think about. The next time you face a superior power, an impossible situation, where are you going to look for your strength? Will it be in that fiery, honorable act of resistance that might just lead to total ruin? Or will it be in the cool, calculated patience of surrender, which allows you to bend, to endure, and to wait for your true moment of power?